Sands of Time. And no, we are not speaking about Days of Our Lives, but our next guest, and we will be talking about 40 years in a shadow government.
Today we're interviewing best-selling author and radio host Dr. Sean David Morton about his epic story spanning over 40 years in the life of Dr. Ted Humphrey and his involvement with Area 51, the Dulce Mesa Wars, Black Ops, and the shadow government. He's also sharing all about Dr. Ted Humphrey's meteoric rise to become the head of an all-powerful global organization that was engaged in a desperate top-secret race against time in order to save our planet.
This is a rare and precious look behind the curtain of covert ops and deep into the black world of super technology with enough hard science to convince even the most cynical skeptic.
I can't wait for that. You can purchase all of Dr. Sean David Morton's books at Amazon and check out his website and radio show at strangeuniverseradio.com.
Ladies and gentlemen, please help us welcome best-selling author Dr. Sean David Morton.
Wow. He must be somebody special.
Oh, yeah. Hello.
Hey, how you doing?
Well, good, man. I feel like I'm on the Muppet Show now. I better be good.
I know, right?
Yay! And all I need is Kermit going, yay! There we go.
It's not easy being green.
Yeah, thank you.
I'm sorry.
It's not easy being green.
That's very good. I think there's a job opening for you over there.
You have no idea.
That was Miss Piggy, right?
Disney. Well, that was Fozzie Bear right there.
Okay.
Sorry.
I wasn't.
Hey, guys, what's up? How are you? Thank you so much for having me on the Universal Broadcasting Network. What a cool thing.
Well, thank you for being here, and I hope you had a great show today. What did you guys talk about?
We interviewed Jim Marrs, actually. Jim Marrs was his book Crossfire was actually used by Oliver Stone to do the JFK movie.
Oh, wow.
And Jim is a best-selling author. He's one of us that managed to crack the I don't know, it's not so much of a glass ceiling, but managed to crack the mainstream liars and the jagoffs and jackoffs in the mainstream media,
right?
With but by using the Kennedy assassination for that. And we just talked a little bit about how once again, with all of this, for all of us, when we're in the truth movement and we're in the what's now called, unfortunately, because the truth is now somehow alternative as opposed to the once again the mainstream liar guys.
Right.
What a concept.
Yeah, exactly. It's again, it's like Brian Williams gets tagged for misremembering a helicopter ride, and yet not a single journalist goes down for lying about
Everything.
Weapons of mass destruction in Iraq, or about 9/11, or about going all the way back to the Kennedy assassination as well. Brian Williams is the guy that gets tagged for it, although there's a deeper conspiracy there which we might talk about. But the whole point was that we were just looking at this, where once you take the red pill and you make the decision, because that's really interesting about the movie, is that Neo decides, and it's the machines that let him loose. That's the one thing I think people miss. The machines are what let him go when he makes the decision to seek the truth. He then suddenly became a virus to the machines, which is why suddenly his pod opens and that big spidery robot grabs him by the throat and pops all the tubes off him, and then flushes him down the toilet in the sewer, if you will, to be picked up by the Nebuchadnezzar. If you remember that scene in the movie.
do.
Welcome back, Mr. Anderson. We've missed you.
Exactly. But there's a spider at the center of this web somewhere, and so if we're kind and understanding to those others who've woken up, because the muscles of their mind have never been used before. Their eyes literally have never been used before, which is why they flash away, they hide away from the light of truth, if you will. But no matter where you pluck the strands of the web, whether or not it's, once again, starting with JFK, because that was such a traumatic experience for everyone in America,
right.
but then moving forward to the Gulf of Tonkin incident, and then of course the Vietnam War, and then of course the Daniel Ellsberg and the Pentagon Papers, where he proved that the military had no intention of winning the war, but just dragging it on for as long as possible. Going all the way up then to 9/11, which seems to have now really kind of trapped us in what I think was sort of a 12-year matrix of nothing really advancing, of this totalitarian matrix and almost like a time loop, if you will, that right after 2012 we started kind of breaking out of it. But I'm just pointing out that all the same people are involved in these conspiracies, all the same families are involved in them. All the same players seem to just be repeating stuff, and it's not a coincidence that they're all involved in every single one of these. It's like they come with an impossible missions force that they like to use, and they go back to those people every single time to continue their the lies and the spreading of untruth, and it's not going to get any better because now we're looking at Hillary and Jeb Bush as being the candidates for president.
Yeah,
it's just really, and Jim's like, oh, I'm my own man. Really, when you come from Bushco and Bushco, and you've got all the same people that your brother worked with, and the same people that your that your dad worked with, and somehow it's all going to be different, and of course.
But we're all brainwashed to it now. It's almost like we're like, okay, what the hell?
Well, not all,
but there's a majority of the country. We're just like, okay, there's really no reason to even fight it. Just
it was kind of funny because with the Democrats, it's like the worse you are. I mean, the more horrible person you are, the better you do in the polls. It's just no matter how many crimes Hillary commits, it's the fact that she's one step away from the shoe shine, 2 steps away from the county line, that the only thing that's stopping this bitch from being indicted and thrown in jail and being the lead in Orange is the New Black is that she's running for president of the United States. And everybody knows it. I mean, everybody knows that she's this weird, shady lady, and that, that probably her daughter isn't Bill Clinton's kid, and she's got a penchant for the ladies, if you will. And, it just makes me shiver.
Yes, she does.
Yeah, if we have to go through 8 years of canary yellow pantsuits and I don't know. I'll just throw up. That's just what I'll do. I mean, and Tim Guns will just throw up.
I loved what Drudge had. They had a picture of her regarding this, her own email network. It said self-server.
Yes, self-server.
I think it's
come on. When you're a Secretary of State, you're using your own email to. It's crazy. Anyway, so that's what we were talking about. We were just talking about once again the spider in the middle and what the whole point of all this is. And I do think that there are people behind the scenes. I mean, I'm on the positive side, where I do think that there are people behind the scenes that are working for our benefit.
That's what I was going to
ask. Of course.
But they don't really know how to help us because we're so inured of this. We've been so dumbed down. We've been so I don't know, ignoratized, I guess, or ignorantized. I'm not sure even what the word is. But we're so dumbed down to it that again, it's almost like if you fix one problem, you create 10 more. If you provide free energy, then you put all these other people out of work. If you cut, well, I'm not even sure what to do. If you introduce all of these amazing technological advancements that I talk about in my book Sands of Time, do you create a global ghetto? Do we have enough responsible people who are willing to be what we call creditors, if you will, or masters, or who are willing to just not be slaves and just spin on the hamster wheel? And it's like that old Star Trek episode where remember the old Star Trek episode where Kirk and Spock in McCoy, there's this weird flower that like spits up in their face, and they're all happy.
Yeah.
I remember, remember Spock's hanging upside down from a tree, and he's got that hot blonde girlfriend. Remember that?
Got high.
And Kirk has to find a way, because this is a perfect role for Kirk. Kirk has to find a way to piss off everybody on the planet so they snap out of it. Remember that?
Yeah.
You remember that episode?
Oh my God,
he says at the end, he says, we were meant to march to the sound of a drum, not the not the sound of a lute. And and Spock says, well, it was the only time that I was ever happy, and and that whole thing. So God bless Leonard Nimoy.
God bless him.
Yeah, but it's kind of that. It's like what happens if you just make everybody happy? Do we have to continue to march to the sound of this drum? I mean, and actually, let me give you my one opinion on the Middle East. The biggest thing that's happened is that here in the United States and the Israelis have now financed these ISIS guys.
Yes,
right.
Which is basically a Hollywood production. I mean, all of their promo videos are being produced on Hollywood and Sunset. These beheadings that they're doing are all completely fake. They don't really show them to you, but the ones that they've showed you, they execute a reporter that we know died 2 years ago in Syria.
Oh, wow.
Then he's cutting the guy's throat with this how do you cut off a guy's head with a butter knife, for God's sake? And the blood's running the wrong way. And then,
hard to do.
But what they have managed to do is piss off the Jordanians, piss off the Iranians, piss off the Iraqis, to the point of where the Iranians and the Iraqis, who, by the way, hate each other's guts, because the Iranians aren't even Arabs, they're Persians. And, they come from a completely different strain than the rest of the Arab race. They come from Medea, who was the wife of Jason the Argonauts and all that stuff. But they fought an 8-year war against each other. And
Right.
what's happening now is that the Iranian Republican Guard is now in command of Iraqi forces to annihilate these ISIS mofos. And what's going to happen is that if they come together and if they annihilate ISIS, the biggest horror that the United States has is that they will lose their boogeyman in that part of the world.
Wow.
And if we don't have a boogeyman, then we've got no reason to storm around and kill people.
To be there.
And
To be there. And I'll give you one example of this. When we invaded Iraq in 2003, we caught Saddam Hussein within 2 weeks. And we had him on ice, and we kept him on ice. We had him by the 1st of April. We invaded, I think, St. Patrick's Day, March 17th, 18th of 2003,
right.
And we had captured Saddam Hussein. We knew exactly where it was, and we were beating the crap out of him. And then they pull him like a rabbit out of a hat on December 3rd, I think it was, of 2003. And it was very strange because it shared story time with them pulling Saddam out of a hat, and at the same time, you have Michael Jackson going, they took pictures of my penis and my buttocks, and it wasn't even the good side of my penis. And they they marched into Michael Jackson's house and flushed him out. So I'm in Cairo, strangely enough, actually shooting a documentary called Prophecy of the Pyramids there. And I'm sitting in this Casbah in the bazaar in like downtown Cairo. And all these Arab guys, when they show Saddam Hussein on the screen, all these Arab guys start screaming bloody murder. And I asked my friend, well, what's going on? And they said, because I understood a little bit of Arabic, and they're screaming that they caught Saddam on Hollywood Boulevard or something. What did they catch Saddam in Hollywood? And I said, well, what's going on with this? And he picked up the clicker and actually stopped the TV and pointed out that in the background of where where this Marine had his boot on Saddam's head and all that, you had these date palms. And the guy says, what are those? And I said, those are date palms. And he goes, when do date palms bloom? And I said, well, they bloom in like March and April. And he goes, see, you see the blooming date palms? And it was proof right behind him that they'd caught him in March and April.
Wow.
Because you had these blooming date palms behind him, which don't bloom in December. And oddly enough, then I was in New York, and I was doing another interview, and I had a guy who was the producer of the show come over to me, this guy, Ari. Just Ari. And he hands me his card, and he says, I want you to know that you're absolutely right, because I worked for Special Forces for the Army, and I was in the interrogation unit, and I was one of the people that was beating the crap out of Saddam Hussein in the beginning of April of 2003. So I'm telling you right now, I'm confirming that, yes, we had him, but why did we pretend not to have him? So we could storm around the country, so we could loot the museums, so we could steal the money from the bank, so we could kill his 2 kids, and we had an excuse for our forces to be there. And and again, I also think too that was also when Bush was, in essence, removed from being president of the United States, because he was told they were going to go in for 6 weeks, take out Saddam, and leave, which is his whole mission accomplished thing.
Well, that didn't
then
happen.
came in and said, no, that's not how it's going to be. Because if you control Iraq, you control Mesopotamia, control all of Asia for the next 100 years. We got to find Batman. So that was Cheney basically just taking over, saying, no, kid, that's not how it's going to be. We're going to stay for a long time. And now the war has lasted, 12 years there. So it's just, never-ending war, never-ending peace. And it's going to be very interesting that now they're saying that the Iranians are going to be able to come in and do for the Iraqis what the United States could not do in 13 years with trillions of dollars, which is basically train their army to take out a terrorist force. So anyway, so there's that. So we'll talk about something better.
No, we actually had Sean Stone.
Oh yeah, he's my good friend. We're working on a project together.
Oh my, yeah, amazing. And we had talked about the ISIS and how they just sprang up out of nowhere. It was surprising. I'm like, we're talking about what's the, not ISIS but the other ISIL, but
it's the same thing.
Yeah, ISIL. But to see how they came out of nowhere and built up so fast, and we're like, where in the hell did these guys come from? We never even heard of them before. Yeah,
well, especially when their leader's a guy named Simon Shimon, and the guy is a former Israeli intelligence, and he's been photographed with John McCain and all this. So ISIS basically stands for the Israeli Secret Intelligence Service, which is what ISIS is. So but anyway, that's and that whole thing is going to be.
Well, I've heard it's been created by this MI6 and by CIA.
Sure, of course.
Yeah.
Of course.
Yeah.
And look what they're doing. What are they doing? They are the area that ISIS is trying to control is exactly in line with where the Saudi Arabians want to build their pipeline through Syria. That's the game. The game is all about oil. They wanted to topple Syria, topple Assad in Syria, so the Saudis could build their pipeline into France, so they can compete with the Russians for oil and natural gas into the rest of Europe.
And that's what the whole game's about. Why oil is $50, $60 a barrel is because Russia needs it at 110.
Yes, but it's also because the new king of Saudi Arabia, Salman,
Yes.
who's the brother of the other guy, this guy died at 89,
Yes.
and their succession doesn't go from father to son; it goes to whoever the brother is. So Salman's like 82, but he's the one that says you're not going to see $100 barrel in oil anymore. He's the one that said we're probably going to get oil back down to like $20 a barrel, which of course is now sending the Russian economy into free fall.
Yes.
The Venezuelans and the Argentinas say they've got to have oil way up there so they can pay the international bankers. So ultimately, it goes back to the spider at the middle of the web, which is the Babylonian banking system and the freaking bankers, all the way back, because everybody's hurting, because these countries have debt over 300
up to the yin yang
300% of gross domestic product. Actually, Japan is 400% of gross domestic product right now.
Jesus Christ!
And they just need to do something like what Iceland did, which is just turn around and say, we're not going to pay interest on money we've already paid, because interest is just something that's just made up. And all the bankers are going, oh my God, if you repudiate the interest, we'll go into free fall. There'll be death and destruction and doom, the apocalypse, dogs living with cats. Oh my God. It's just, and they're telling the Greeks what to do. And it's just, it's going to be weird. And the Europeans don't get along anyway. So the whole European Union idea is just kind of Hitler light. So, it's what Hitler wanted to do, except without Hitler, unless Angela Merkel's his daughter, because she really looks like him. But
well, he did have 2 children.
Yeah, that's what we say. I don't know where they went, but Angela looks really sneaky.
Well, what we're talking about now is actually your volume 3 and 4 of Sands of Time.
Oh, okay, all right. Well, actually, I'm working on volume 3, but we have volume 1 and 2. But Sands of Time. Big. Yep, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say this really is kind of the beginning. What you wrote us, volume 1 and volume 2, is what we're talking about today, and it's fascinating that it's been around and going on for so long, and yet we're still doing the same stuff over and over as a human race.
Well, this is what I think what the book points out, and this is what this gentleman was a contact of mine for about. He started contacting me after I started investigating Area 51. And started appearing on Coast to Coast, and that whole thing evolved just because Art Bell was the only guy who would take our phone calls, and there just happened to be a cell phone. I'm sorry, a payphone right out in front of this place called the Little Ailey Inn, which was a burger joint in Rachel, Nevada. We would see crazy things at Area 51, and we would call this nutty talk show host who would actually take our calls and be interested in what we had to say about what we were seeing when we were camping out there, and so. He started providing me with a stream of information for me to begin to release on the radio, and the last I heard from him was he called me. He was in the grandstand or on the podium at Obama's inauguration in 2009, and he calls me on the cell phone because I bet him money, because I'd written an article that I predicted that Obama was going to screw up the oath, and that he was going to screw up the oath of office because
He did.
Sorry?
He did.
Yeah, because he was not a citizen, and he could not take the Article 6 oath, which is the article of the presidency of the republic. Now, he could be the CEO of the corporation and commander-in-chief, which are 2 other oaths and papers that you sign and all that stuff. But I said, you watch, he's going to screw up the oath. They're going to find a way for him to screw it up. And he did. So Ted calls me on the phone, and I hear him laughing on the TV, because he's laughing up in the corner saying, you son of a bitch, I can't believe I just watched the president of the United States screw this oath up, and you told me it was going to happen. And that was the last I heard from him. But then I got contacted by some very scary attorneys up in Century City who asked me to come in on an estate matter, who told me that the Dr. Humphrey, not his real name, by the way, but Dr. Humphrey had, quote, moved on. They never said he died. They just said he moved on. And I said, I don't really know what that means. He said, you don't have to know, but he wills you these journals. And so I got these 4 journals of his experiences, which then I then turned into kind of a did not get myself shot, turned into an action adventure story, if you will, of his life in the shadow government. And it's very interesting where it starts, because his father was experimenting in Barstow, California, with time travel. In essence, he had been with a group of Nazi scientists that they'd brought over after the war, specifically one of them being Herr Dr. Hans Kammler. And Kammler he was the Uber Grubenführer. He was the most powerful man in Europe outside of Berlin, outside of Hitler. And he was also the one that actually set up the logistics for the concentration camps. But it was Kammler that was the one that was doing all the research and experiments on what they called the Nazi Bell, which is known as the
Yes.
diglocka,
Yes.
the diglocken.
Yes.
And that was also because when they were experimenting with the bell, it was creating gravity waves, and the gravity waves were actually altering the flow of time. And that became of great interest. You know, somebody should do a movie about like time traveling Nazis or something. But but anyway, the challenge of this is that then Ted's father disappears when he's about 17 years old or so, and he then dives into the shadow government really to figure out what happened to his father. So the litany goes from him going to USC and then going to Caltech and then being offered coming up with a rocket fuel formula that the government then classifies. And so he then goes to he works at Montauk, actually at Camp Hero up in upstate New York. And it was there that they have a device which they called the Beast. And this device was based on the technology that they'd learned from the Nazi bell. And it had two rotating rings going clockwise and counterclockwise with a central base ring in the center. And they discovered that you could create a field that could actually teleport objects from place to place. So what they were doing with this knowledge was they were taking these probes and they were teleporting probes into the heart of Russian nuclear experiments so they could actually then study the time dilation effects on nuclear explosions. Because whenever you have an explosion, there's actually at the center of the explosion, it actually does dilate time. And with the unique part about nuclear explosions as well, which may be another reason why these extraterrestrials supposedly contacted Eisenhower and said, look, we'll give you all kinds of stuff if you stop playing with your nuclear bombs, is that they rip open holes in the time-space continuum. Oh. So the two biggest things that happened in the history of man, as far as what's going on with, I guess, what you would call an alien invasion, was a series of experiments that the Germans did with the Nazi bell, which tore open this rip in the fabric of time and space, and the Project Rainbow, which was the Philadelphia experiment on August 13th of 1943, August 12th, I'm sorry, 1943. So and that not only did that rip a hole in the time-space continuum, but the USS Eldridge then traveled through time and ripped holes in the time-space continuum in 20-year in 20-year spaces, and it went to the end of its tether in August of 2003 at the end of a 60-year cycle, and then kind of created this gigantic electromagnetic pulse, and then shot back through time where it then reappeared outside of the Norfolk Naval Test Center. And part of the thing that backs this up is that I wrote an article in February of 2003 where, after interviews with people like Preston Nichols and Al Bielek and all that, I said, well, watch what's going to happen, because if they're right, the Eldridge is going to reappear somewhere off the East Coast, and it's going to reappear and it's going to create a massive electromagnetic pulse of some kind, and this is going to happen between August 12th, and 13th, and 14th in this period of time, and see what happens on that day. Well, lo and behold, after I'd written this article in February and I posted it online so everybody could see it, something happened. You'll notice that it was 4 p.m. of August 13th of 2003. That was the New York blackout that blacked out New York City for 3 days, and big chunks of the East Coast for 28 days. And I'm telling you that it was it was an after effect of the Eldridge ripping these holes in time and then going back to where it came from.
Now, is this reversible when we rip something like that? Is that something that can be corrected, or is it?
That's what we've been working on. That's what we've spent almost 50 years actually working on, trying to come up with the devices and the machines that can actually plug these holes. Because it began an invasion from two different sectors. And do we have a break coming up?
No, go for it.
Okay, well, I just need just 1 second. Can I get you guys to just riff for just 1 second?
Yeah, go ahead.
God, yeah.
I need to take a quick break. So just do a commercial or something. I'll be right back. Okay?
All right, go for it.
Thank you.
Well, we're talking to
Dr. Sean David Morton. He just finished his radio show in Vegas, and he's definitely schooling us today.
Oh, my word. We have to have this guy back like next week.
Yeah,
and he's
amazing.
reading a series called Sands of Time, and he's done 2 books, and he's working on 2 more.
Yeah, and we're talking about the shadow governments.
Yes.
And I'm really curious of when he says they.
Well, what that means if it's a shadow government, there really are MIBs.
Right.
Men in Black.
Right.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm wondering why they choose who they choose for president.
They do not know combat.
Oh, because they're assigned.
Well, I know.
Oh
they're
well,
assigned,
Obama
but
was picked a long time ago.
Yeah,
I mean a long time.
A
ago.
lot of them are.
Yeah. And it's hard to believe that they chose like Bush.
Well,
And
I mean, Bush was the one that was chosen, and Al Gore almost won.
he did
Al
win.
Gore did.
I mean, Al Gore did win in Florida. That's pretty much a bona fide fact. I have it on firsthand personal knowledge of a guy who was in Florida at the time, and yeah, Al Gore won.
And
then they
was
dinked around
president.
with it, and obviously he didn't get the presidency.
Yeah.
Well, I was real surprised because of Al Gore, why he didn't fight it.
Well, because the powers that be probably told him
They're like
resistance is futile.
And it's easy. All you got to do is hold your wife up or your kids up and say, anything could happen.
Yeah, resistance is futile.
Oh, it's a scary world that we live in, but it's
Yeah, and I want to ask Sean David about the time space continuum, the rips in the energy fields, because if that's how other beings from other parts of the universe come into our Earth's gravitational pull, is through multidimensionality and parallel universes, then we just F that up all over the place.
Yes, we did.
And which is why they're going to the president, or went to the president back in the day and had them to try to stop playing around with the atomic bomb.
I was gonna say, that's
hence
what we're
Roswell.
Yeah.
Because we were playing with matches, and they said, guys, you can't do this. Because, I mean, any nuclear explosion just on its own, you're going to see it from space.
Yeah, you're going to see it from
let
space.
alone the time
affect
continuum.
everything.
It's ripples.
It could literally F up the entire
It'll ripple the gig.
Yeah, I'm telling you, and that's why you see and hear often about the spaceships coming into any area where they're doing missile testing and atomic
Well, they've shut
testing.
down many nuclear launches.
Yes, they have.
And
all over
systems.
the world. Ours, Russians. Yes, they have.
Oh, that's scary. I mean, it's
thank goodness.
Thank God they're there to watch over us.
Yes.
But what about the ones that are not our friends? I'm surprised they don't let it happen.
Well, they have their own agenda for the most part, because like some of the reptilians.
Hi, I'm very sorry. I've been dealing with a bit of a stomach flu, so I'm very sorry. I just had to.
No worries.
I haven't had a break because I have my own show.
That's right. Well, we're glad you're here with us, and
I'm okay.
We've just been talking among ourselves.
Yes, about you.
But Eddie, you had some questions. I want you to do that.
Well, Sean David, I wanted to ask you about when you left us just a second ago. We were talking about how there's a rip in. I'm going to use my limited language in the electromagnetic field and or the multidimensionality, the non-physical part of the veil.
Yes.
And you said that back in the day, the extraterrestrials went. Was it to Eisenhower?
Yeah. Well, there were two sets. The two sets that came through this rip, and the first set met with we think were benevolent, but they were these tall whites that met with Eisenhower in February of 1953.
Yep.
That they called, and it's a fairly famous meeting. You can see the testimonies of Gerald Light and Archbishop McIntyre of the Los Angeles Archdiocese, where these tall whites that they called the Etherians. They never called themselves anything, by the way. The only reason they called them Etherians is because they had devices on their belt that could allow them to appear and disappear. Wow. And they demonstrated their ships and the whole thing. And what they said to Eisenhower was, well, look, we'll help you with technology and we'll help you ascend on your planet if you just give up the nuclear weapons. And they warned Eisenhower at that time that what was happening with the nuclear testing was that we were knocking the planet out of its orbit, basically. That it was sort of like putting a shoe in a washing machine, that we were actually knocking we disturbed the rotation, basically the nodal axis and the rotation of the planet, number one. Number two, that we were ripping these holes in time space as well, and that we just didn't know what we were messing with. Now, Eisenhower, number one, thought to himself, well, if you don't want us to have nuclear weapons, then I want nuclear weapons. Number two, you have this superior technology which could roll over and wipe us out. Number three, for all I know, you could be Nazis, because he knew the kind of technology that the Germans had.
Yep.
He made the famous statement that if we hadn't beaten them when we did, if we'd given them 6 more months, they would have won the war.
Yes,
so he said, thanks but no thanks. Well, then they warned him and they said, look, there's another group out there that also came through another rip in the time-space continuum, and they're not as pleasant as us, and they'll probably be contacting you. And these were the famed Greys. Whether or not they came from Zeta Reticuli, I don't know, but these are the famed Greys that then contacted Eisenhower in November of first meeting was February, the next meeting was sometime in November of 53. And they said, well, we don't care. You can play with your nuclear bombs all you want. What we want is genetic material. Our race is at the end of a breeding spiral, and we very much are interested. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to abduct people. We're going to take sperm, eggs, do some minor experiments, and then we'll wipe their minds and put them back, no harm, no foul. But in exchange for that, we'll give you technology, which was kind of like trading glass beads and brushes and mirrors for Manhattan Island. And it was the same. I mean, they probably learned from the white man pretty well.
Right.
And so they said, well, let's go pull the wool over these dumb Indians' eyes. And that's kind of what they did. So not only did they give us technology, this then led to a formal agreement with them in '64, which was called the Sigma Treaty. And when Sigma came along, we gave them one, maybe two, but a few underground bases to operate out of. And we completely lost control over anything that they were doing because we gave them the lower levels at a facility that was originally designed as a nuclear storage place underneath a mesa in northern New Mexico on a Hickory Apache Indian reservation called the Dulce Archuleta Mesa. And Dulce is where, oh my God, Dulce is where everything goes off the rails because it results in a minor skirmish in which 4 of our people are killed. A couple of those people were actually Secret Service men, which is a whole other story, but it's kind of weird. But it then leads to an all-out war where Reagan then ordered us to, not us, but our side of the military, to actually go into Dulce and clean it out. Probably around, which is described in my book, but I think that's about 87. I think.
So you're talking from 63 to 87. I mean,
I'm talking 53 all the way up.
53 to 87. I mean, that's a long time.
Well, it's also because we discovered in the 80s and what they finally informed Reagan of, and had they told Reagan before they did the operation, Reagan would have flipped out. Reagan would have just nuked the whole thing because they were building. They were building an underground tunnel system,
yes,
for high-speed ceramic trains, basically.
Yes, trains. Right. Yeah.
And it was called the Red Line and the Blue Line because the red line ran east-west, the blue line ran north-south.
Right.
And as they were completing this, and this is kind of interesting because I knew Phil Schneider in the early '90s before he was murdered in '96, and but I just went back. I mean, after I wrote Sands of Time, I went back and I started looking at Phil Schneider's material on the web. And it's so interesting because it interconnects with everything that I was talking about with Sands of Time from another point of view. I mean, Phil sort of appears in the book as one of the mole men that contacts the people on the surface that says, you got to see what we found down here. Because when they were actually completing the tunnel to link them up under Dulce, they found an abattoir underneath the base of hundreds of thousands of human skeletons, headless human skeletons. And we discovered that what they were doing was not genetic experimentation. They were basically grabbing people and apparently boiling them down into soup, if you will, to store as food supplies for what quite possibly could be like a future invasion of the planet, which is then when we freaked out and went in there and cleaned it out.
So you're talking about the DUMBs, right? Deep underground military bases?
Well, Dulce wasn't that deep underground. I mean, it's... I went back with just to prove that it's there, just so you guys know that I'm not just whistling Dixie here. In 1989, I was part of a scientific team with Dr. Jim Delatoso, Dr. Fred Bell, Paul Shepard, Jim Randazzo, who was a director-producer with video cameras and the whole thing. And it was kind of on a bet what we did. There was a guy named Bill Moore, and Bill Moore had done some books on the Bermuda Triangle with Charles Burletts, the language guy. And Moore made a lot of really insulting comments. He was saying that he had completely made up the whole story about Dulce and that he released it into the wild just to show people how stupid UFO investigators can be and how easily they can be fooled. And he basically admitted, well, no, he did admit, he said, I'm working as a double agent for the government and I'm lying to you and the government is laughing at you. And so we took up that challenge. And Jim Delatoso developed, this is 89, mind you, he developed a deep underground penetrating radar system that in essence dealt with what we call data tabling, where you shoot a sound into the ground in a beam, you record the bounce back on that sound, then you collect it, and because here's what we did around Dulce. We went to Dulce, we pounded the mesa with these sonics. We ultrasounded the lake on the north side, the whole mesa around it, and then we data tabled the slices of bread, put all the bread together to make the image with the Cray computer out of the University of San Diego. And there it was. I mean, there was the base. There's a dome at the top. There was a nuclear pile at the center. that was functioning when we were there in 80. It was December of '89. That was giving off, I think, a 440 cycle signature, which is military standard, and you could see the tubes underneath it. It went all the way down to where there were moving
Trains
underneath it. So this, as far as we could tell, this was a functioning active base. As a matter of fact, when we did our first bounce on the sound, Jim said either all my equipment needs to be recalibrated or we're standing on top of New York City. And we got that all on film. Then we took an abductee up in a helicopter. She'd never been up above the base before, but she pointed out the openings and these trails that came up out of one cave and would go into another, and the whole deal. So it was a very dangerous place, and also it was because of the nature of the extraterrestrials there, who operate on a hive mind. They actually have very small brains as individuals, but what they do is they link together with a low wave empathic field, if you will.
Is that kind of like the Borg?
Yes, that's exactly right. But what happened was that you couldn't assign personnel to the facility for more than 2 or 3 weeks because you would go crazy. You would go nuts because of this buzzing that you would hear in your mind. This language of these beings, which in essence is like a virus. Actually, it's like a brain virus to human beings. And they were all being run, and I describe this in my book, but they were all being run by a Nordic that was named Lord Tugi, and Tugi was operating with these guys because his planet was being held hostage, that they would destroy his planet if he didn't help them interact with with us lesser mortals, the human beings. But that's that's all described in the book. But that's where Dulce sort of intersects with everything, and there's going to be a couple of movies about it. We're talking to some people now. I've got a script called Dark Mesa. There's the guys who did Paranormal are now talking to me about, because I'm apparently the only person that has footage, the footage that I've got from inside the base of these weird tanks where they're growing these creatures, and and the ultrasound and the interviews and all that from '89. I think I'm the only one that's hung on to it long enough with with all my other junk in the storage space somewhere. So anyway, so my one thing about this is that, and this is what we were talking about way back there, is there seem to be two groups on the planet. There are what I call the autocrats and the technocrats. The autocrats are the politicians, the guys who rise to positions of power because they commit great crimes. And I think nobody in American politics today can rise to any position of power unless they commit some kind of great crime, because they've got to have you on a leash. They've got to hold the other end of that leash to be able to yank you down. Like Brian Williams as an example. If you decide to break out of their cult or get outside their box, the cult that we call America, and the other part is, and what they do is that they're setting up a cage, and the cage or the prison that they're setting up, there's really minimal arguments right now going on between the two power players, these two families, the Rockefellers on the one side, who control oil, distribution of oil, which is why you always have a Rockefeller shill as Secretary of State, because they control the Navy, which controls the distribution of oil, because that's why we insist on countries trading in petrodollars, because if you don't, not only will we blow you up, but it's the first time in history, really, since the Spanish, that one Navy controls the oceans of the entire world, and that's the United States Navy. You cannot get a boat from point A to point B without the permission, implicit or overt, of the U.S. Navy. So that's why you always have the Secretary of State who controls oil and distribution of oil, and that's why we insist it be done in petrodollars. On the other hand, you have the Rothschilds, and the Rothschilds, which were the Habsburgs, which then go back to Meyer Amstel, who changed his name to Red Shield, and they control the kind of a Germanic nobility, which they then put on the throne with Queen Victoria. So that means they control the British Empire, and ultimately all of this, most of that is then really a subsidiary corporation of the Vatican, which is unusual. So,
wow.
I mean, in the United States, and you can look this up if you want. If you look up the Dun and Bradstreet numbers, the business numbers, you can go on a website called Manta.com. And I just did some research into this, where I go on Manta.com, and I'm just goofing around. And I just typed in the United States of America, for a Dun and Bradstreet number, and there it was. I mean, the United States of America had a Dun and Bradstreet number. Had its location was Capitol Hill. There were 3 main executives. It had 2.7 million employees. Was established in 1787. But the chief executive officer, the CEO of the Corporation of the United States of America, is Archbishop Derek R. McLeod.
No way.
Who is the Archbishop of the Washington D.C. Archdiocese on Michigan and 4th Street. And I figure it's McLeod because he's the Highlander and there can be only one. That's the
right.
He fights all the other immortals and then he gets to be CEO of the United States.
What about the rumor that this is the last pope?
I don't know. Everybody for the Pope stuff, everybody relies on Malachi. Malachi was the 10th century Irish prophet who had this whole line of popes. But what I point out to people is that it doesn't have to be successive. He does have these, for example, he predicts exactly Pope John Paul that he would be the moon pope, that he would rule for a period of the moon. So here we have John Paul I, who rules for 33 days, tries to get rid of the Vatican Bank, and gets basically poisoned by the mafia.
Yes, he did.
Now you've got John Paul II who comes on, and he describes him as the Sun Pope, as ruling for, that he would be there for like 28 years, what have you. But then it just kind of, because now his prophecies say that then you have what they call, his prophecies say that then the very last pope is going to be Petrus Romanus, or Peter the Roman, and that's a big thing for him. But that there's another pope somewhere in between that he calls Gloria Olivae, or the Pope of the Glorious Olive Branch. So somebody has to be known for some kind of peace deal or something, and that certainly wasn't Benedict.
No.
But I do think it's interesting. My take on this is that, and if I go off on this for about 30 seconds or so,
go for it.
That if you understand that the intelligence agencies on this planet, everybody talks about a global Jewish conspiracy, which is kind of nonsense. It's like, the Bushes are all Episcopalians. Is it a giant Episcopalian conspiracy of the New World Order? And the friggin' Rockefellers are Episcopalian as well. But the challenge here is that if you look at every single intelligence agency on Earth, you don't go anywhere. In the FBI, the DIA, the CIA, MI5, MI6, the Exim Bureau, Politburo, Interpol, you don't go anywhere without being a Jesuit.
I was going to say they're Jesuits. Yep.
In a Jesuit
Definitely
school.
Jesuits.
Nowhere. Yep. They're all Jesuits.
Janet Napolitano's a Jesuit, et cetera, et cetera.
They're all Jesuits.
Absolutely.
So what are the Jesuits? The Jesuits are basically the Society of Jesus. They have a general. By the way, they call him a general because he controls an army. So, and who is the core of the Jesuits? The core of the Jesuits are the Knights of Malta. So the Knights of Malta, who then control the Jesuits. So here's why I think it's interesting. If you believe, let me take it 2 steps further. If you believe that 9/11 was a false flag, let's go there first.
Okay.
Then if you say, if it was a false flag, then the false flag was probably put together by, let's say, the U.S. government. But let's take it 1 step further. If you take it 1 step further, it was designed and put together by the intelligence agencies of the United States government, which are controlled by the Jesuits. So what happens is that not only do you knock down the buildings, but you then pin it on the Arabs, and now you have the Crusades.
This is crazy.
Well, yeah,
Wow.
and then
Crazy.
6 weeks after 9/11, you have the Patriot Act, which gutted the Constitution.
Oh my God.
Which and Homeland Security, and Janet Napolitano is a Jesuit, and the fact that Hitler had a Homeland Security. So really, it's our Gestapo.
Right, and so the Jesuits then take over everything. They take over the police force and all this other stuff. But if you then take it to the next step, they saw radical Islam as a growing threat to Christianity down the line. So therefore, and by the way, it not just Sands of Time, but I wrote another book all about this, which is called The Dark Prophet, Veil of the Antichrist, which I wrote in 2009. But I predicted everything that would go on in the Middle East. I predicted the end of Gaddafi, the end of the Egyptian government, and that all these governments would be destroyed in disarray. And that then what you would have is you would have one guy who would be able to then link Islam together and become this one, the predicted 12th Imam, or the Nostradamus Antichrist. So I just took all of these prophecies together and then took it from an intelligence point of view as to who would fund this guy, how would he link things together, what would be the circumstances where this would happen. So I think what happens is that now you have a holy war of the cross and the crescent. Mm-hmm. Now we're going after Islam actively, even though they did nothing for 9/11. So bear with me on this. You have Pope Benedict who comes in. And Benedict, Cardinal Ratzinger, was the guy who's been running everything behind the scenes for years. He was the one that thought that John Paul should have retired, and he never believed in the Pope being there for life. But here's Ratzinger. Ratzinger then comes in, and Ratzinger doesn't really press the conflict against the Arabs. Well, the Jesuits don't like it. So they have a meeting with Ratzinger. And this meeting with Ratzinger lasts 4 hours in an afternoon. It's very strange. From noon to 4 p.m., they meet with Ratzinger. Between 4 p.m. and 7 p.m., lightning strikes St. Peter's Basilica twice, hits the cross on the dome twice, and at 7 p.m., the Pope resigns. For the first time in 700 years, the Pope then resigns. And who is it they get to replace him? They get Pope Francis, who just so happens to be a Jesuit for the first time ever.
Oh,
yes, indeed. He's a Jesuit.
And by the way, he's not named after Francis of Assisi.
No, he's not.
He's named after Francis Xavier, who was a famous Jesuit leader. There you go. So now we've got a Jesuit in. So is he the Black Pope? But you will notice that everything is sort of amplified in the Middle East. And, of course, Pope Francis is now pushing this sort of world religion and all that. And he seems like a good guy. He is Italian. He was born in Italy and raised in Italy until he was about 7 before he moved to Argentina. So I'm just saying that it's a holy war. And we've been fighting this holy war since 1999. And they see it, and this is what, in my book, they don't need force of arms to be able to beat Europe. All they need to do is move 1 million plus or so Muslim immigrants, which is what they're doing. I mean, and they're collapsing the social structure of Europe. Yeah, the real bomb is that you have these guys who move up there and their wives have 5 kids, and their whole thing is that they're going to basically take over Europe by force of the invasion and then mass immigration and basically just breed the Europeans out of existence.
England is having issues already.
The most popular name in England right now, the #1 child name in England, you know what it is?
Muhammad.
It's Muhammad. Yeah, exactly. Because they were at the end of the war, they were 98% Anglo-Saxon, and now they're basically a minority in their own country, and they've done it to themselves.
Yep, they have.
That is crazy.
So the next step is that this is the balance now between the Rothschilds on the one hand. Now the Rothschilds who control the old banking money, because you're talking about funds that go back to the de Medicis, that go back to the original House of Spencer, all this old money. The Rothschilds, the only argument they have with the Rockefellers is the Rockefellers, their attitude is, look, we don't care about the sheep. We'll just kill the sheep. We'll slaughter the sheep, shear the sheep. We'll just get more sheep. They want war. When you understand when the USSR went bankrupt, the executor of the bankruptcy was David Rockefeller. David Rockefeller was sitting in his dacha in St. Petersburg, and he was the one that was writing the checks for the collapse of the Soviet Union. So now you understand that not only was the Soviet Union a corporation, it was a Rockefeller corporation.
Wow.
And the Rockefeller Corporation killed 125 million people since its inception in 1917. Now, Putin comes in, and
they don't like Putin.
Well, the first thing he does, right, because Jacob Rothschild said he's a traitor to the New World Order. But what does he do?
He's standing up.
He believes in the theory of abiotic oil. He drills a hole in Siberia that's 48,000 feet down, and suddenly oil just comes like Jed Clampett, just comes Texas crude,
Texas tea.
Persian Perrier. It just comes up out of the ground, and he pours all of his money and resources into the oil.
Yes.
Then he pays off the World Bank, the Bank of International Settlements, which is the Vatican, and the IMF. Pays them off, so Russia's completely debt-free.
Yes, and
marches with the FSB into Rockefeller's house, basically grabs him by the scruff of the neck with a warrant and kicks him out of the country.
Wow, that was
out of the country. He says, "You are no longer welcome here, comrade," and basically gives him the boot. He escorts him to the airport, says, "Never come back." So you can see why old Vladimir is not real popular there.
No, he's not, right. But he's doing the right thing.
So the rest of the Rothschilds, their only argument is that they want, they'll build the same prison that the Rockefellers are building, but their argument is, well, we want to give people a blanket and a pillow, because if we give them some health care and, make it like France or Canada, then people will be much more willing to march into the caves, the cages that we're building for them. So there's the autocrats. You have a whole other group of people, however, that have been dealing with real technology, that have been dealing with stuff from the Germans, from stuff that we've gotten from crashed extraterrestrial craft, from all of this. And here are their main goals. Their main goals, on the one hand, have been, they understood since 1945 that these nuclear weapons, these bombs and all, and we've tested, us and the Chinese and the Russians have tested, we've dropped 1,700 bombs on Nevada, just to give you an idea. 1,700 nuclear weapons have been exploded on Nevada.
And let alone how many have been dropped in Marshall Islands.
Yeah, there you go. And that's weird too, because of the way it actually affects the planet.
Right.
But we've knocked the Earth off kilter, and this is another reason why the electromagnetic field is going crazy. So they write this big report which is called the Flight of the Key Bird, and actually was featured in a book called World in Peril, where way back then the Rand Corporation was saying, look, magnetic north has become untethered, and it's marching towards true north. And if true north and magnetic north meet, the planet might just flip over. Or you might have an electromagnetic shift of the planet, which means everything that's connected to an 8 hertz ground wire will fry. Every piece of technology will just be obsolete. Suddenly we're going to be back in, I don't know, the 1990s or something. So it's, oh my God, 94, and Friends will come on again.
Don't say that. Don't say that.
But here's what's happened that was kind of weird. Magnetic north starts marching towards true north. So that's one thing. How do we keep the planet from tipping over? That's number one. Number two, how do we calm down the sun? Because the sun was going into these cycles where something was wrong with it.
Right.
And these solar flares and these the sun is doing all kinds of weird things which are affecting the entire solar system. That's number two. And number three, create a gigantic planetary and solar system-wide defense grid from something that's on its way. And every source that I've talked to really higher up seem to really be afraid of something that they know that's coming, that they believe will get here sometime early next decade.
Is that the Klingons?
It's not the Klingons.
Possibly. I'm not, they've been called different things. They've been called the Animos. They've been called, there's just all kinds of different, there's different words for them, but they seem to be part of some kind of sort of dark federation or something. And they seem to be on their way here. So this is another reason why we're building all this, kind of off-world technology. And that's actually what I'm working on book 3. The rest of the notes are all about, bases we have on the moon and the triangular ships that we've been building, the TR-3B Astra.
TR-3Bs, yes.
Matter of fact, Northrop is now even advertising that they've got the new triangular drone, the C-41 SR, which actually stands for Surveillance and Reconnaissance. All the SR programs are Surveillance and Reconnaissance, or SR-71 is Surveillance and Reconnaissance. But they've actually got they have a commercial now where they show this triangular drone on there. So that's pretty much what they're doing. They're also closing the interdimensional gaps to keep these things from kind of popping into our space. And the biggest thing, another thing about the book as well, and this is what was my real fascination with Area 51. And Area 51, when they moved the 9 craft from Wright-Patterson Air Force Base to Area 51, and they moved these in about 1986, and they were there until approximately, I think, 93, and then they moved everything up to Utah to a place called Area 6413, which is also they call the Dugway Proving Ground, which they used to test nerve gas, so they have all these big signs up that says, "Oh, you could run into nerve gas if you come out here." So, but what they were doing is that when Project Pounce actually got a hold of these ships and they shipped them to Area 51, the thing that they were interested in was not so much the propulsion, which is what Bob Lazar actually had talked about, the element 115 and the ability to generate an antimatter thermo, a 96% antimatter thermonuclear reaction, which then could power the ships themselves. But the fact that the ships actually had the ability to dilate time, so that when you actually got in the craft, you could spend like 2 minutes inside the ship and then get out and realize that 24 hours had passed outside. So they were interested in how the craft managed to actually dilate time, because that's the ultimate weapon. The ultimate weapon is to be able to use time itself to be able to quite possibly defeat whatever's coming or whatever's going on. And we then discovered that there's a villain in the book named Dr. Simon Ratterman, who is kind of the time-traveling Nazi who actually figured it out and has his own little device called a time runner that then allows him to kind of jump backwards and forwards in different periods in time. So that was the biggest research. That's a lot of what was going on. Now, as far as them fixing the planet, this is what they've done and what you've seen on the outside from what they're doing. Number one, the electromagnetic field, the magnetic field of the Earth was marching at a pretty steady clip, so that between 2012 and 2016, true north and magnetic north would have met, and you would have then seen possibly an electromagnetic shift of the Earth. And the sun was going crazy at the same time. So Barack Obama has this posse of people that sort of follow him around, these 93 guys that go to these weird events with him. So he gets the Nobel Peace Prize. Huh? What? And even Obama's like, I get it, I'm black and I'm all cool, but I haven't done anything yet really to earn this. I mean, you got to give him some props for that. That he was like, it's kind of dumb for me to get this.
Absolutely. 3 months in.
Yeah. And he goes to Oslo, Norway. And in Norway, a weird thing happens in the sky called the Norway spiral. Now, the Norway spiral, and I can prove this. I've got all the evidence to prove it. The Norway spiral is created by the European version of HARP, which is called ISCAT, which stands for the European Incoherent Scattered Array Radiation, is what it's called. And they've got it looks like it's very Star Wars. It's like these dishes, and when they turn them on, they create basically this death beam that goes up into space. So I can prove that they used ISCAT to create this time-space vortex, this 9-minute black hole in between here and the sun. And there's photographic evidence that shows that we create these weird things because these black holes pull energy off the sun, which calms it down, number one. But after December 9th of 2009, when this thing appeared, suddenly electromagnetic north stops moving north. And it's been moving north since 1945, and it takes, apparently listens to too much Rush Limbaugh or something, because it takes a hard right turn. Yeah. And this thing starts now moving, starts moving due east. And now the electromagnetic North Pole is in the middle of the Siberian Sea. So it's actually heading towards Russia. So instead of going up, instead of going north, it's now going east. So that kind of solves the problem of the electromagnetic array. And at the same time, after that, the sun goes completely quiet, goes completely dead for almost a year. No sunspots, no radiation, no nothing. So that's the first thing. It's kind of weird. The second thing is they're using explosives, sonics, and various very advanced versions. It's not even HARP anymore. It's stuff that they use from space that they can pulse this on. But they're creating earthquakes. They're creating these very, very large earthquakes, and the earthquakes are realigning the geology of the Earth as well to make sure that we don't have, giant tidal waves and the Earth changes.
Tsunamis.
Pardon me?
Tsunamis.
Yeah, tsunamis, exactly. But and the one miscalculation that they made was Fukushima, actually, because it did create. And the thing about Fukushima is you had a 9.3 earthquake, which altered the nodal axis of the Earth by 6.5 inches. And yet you did not have a single building in Japan that was actually knocked down by the earthquake. The damage was done by the wave that actually came in. And you can actually prove that there was an initial explosion that caused a 6.4, and then another 7.2, and then a 7.8, and then so it amplified, because what do? We kickstarted with an explosion, probably a nuclear bomb of some kind in a trench. Then we bounce the sound wave off the other side of the Earth. Then when the wave comes back, we tap the top of the wave, probably with a satellite or HARP project or something, and it taps the top of the wave, and then you overflow like the water in the bathtub, which is Fukushima. But this is where it gets weird. Should I say. Yeah. Weirder. Cornell University notices that there's a frequency pattern of these giant earthquakes. And the frequency pattern, and they did this whole thing based on pi r squared. You have pi r squared of 3.14, but if you look at time, we view time and we calculate time in base 12 mathematics, not base 10, because everything's 60. So the face of a clock is 60. If you take 60 and times it by pi r squared, which is the mathematical radius of a circle, you come up with 188.88888. Well, this is where it gets even weirder, because if you look at all these earthquakes going back to about 2009 or so, after the Norway spiral, every single one of these major earthquakes has been in 188-day patterns. So if you start with the Fiji earthquake, 188 days later is the Bio earthquake in Chile. 188 days later is the Christchurch earthquake in New Zealand. 188 days later is the Fukushima earthquake. And then you go directly across to the other side of the plate, and 188 days later you have a 7.4 and a 7.6 on the San Andreas Fault in Mexico. Which, by the way, the Mexicans were completely ready for. They'd warned the Mexicans already. They'd emptied the schools. They'd emptied the industries. And it was National Earthquake Preparedness Day. And they were all running drills when these earthquakes hit. So they're realigning the geology of the planet. And they started with the Northridge quake here in Los Angeles, because how I got sort of famous for this is that not only did I predict when the Northridge quake was going to happen, but I'd written articles before saying the military was going to do this. And this was going to be a controlled role, and they were going to use explosives and sonics, which is what happened, for them to do all this stuff. So again, you've got technocrats that have an amazing technology that they can't really release to the world because they don't really trust the people of the planet. And at the same time, I think they're all keeping it secret because if they told the people of the earth what they might be up against, again, as I was told by this gentleman, he says it's. Have you ever read the end of the Bible? It's all the bad parts of the end of the Bible.
Right. Yeah. They saved the bad for last.
Kind of, yeah.
And unfortunately, we are out of time. So in 30 seconds or less, what's going to happen next?
Oh my God.
Oh, I can't do that.
Well, I want to ask you. Do you think we'll go to war with Iran?
No.
Israel?
No, not with Valerie Jarrett, who's a Persian Muslim, who's the best friend of Barack Obama.
Yeah, Persian Muslim. Totally.
That's not going to happen now, and that's another reason why Netanyahu's been banging the same drum for since 1992 about all that. So what's going to happen now is that all your listeners are going to go to strangeuniverseradio.com,
Yes,
Amazon, and you're going to buy my book, Part 1 and Part 2 of Sands of Time, and you're going to give it a 5-star rating like everybody else has, and you're going to love it. And I'm going to be on your show again soon.
please.
Yes, you are.
Are you kidding me?
Boy, you just saved me a lot of time of begging you to come back. There you go.
Are you kidding me?
Oh.
No, you're amazing. And this
my
information, I know people out there that have been wanting to hear this, and if they haven't been listening to you, they're definitely going to go to strangeuniverseradio.com and start Monday through Friday.
Monday through Friday, from 3 to 5 Pacific, Monday through Friday.
And you, I mean, truly, you put you gave us 3 hours of information in 50 minutes. It's ridiculous how brilliant you are.
You are.
You guys are great. Thank you so much for being a warrior for the truth and for the future. I appreciate all you guys.
Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you, sir. Definitely, you're coming back, and we'll talk soon and figure out when.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks again.
All right. Take care, Dr. Sean David Morton. Be right back.